Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Oman Arab Bank Online Learning Hub. My name is Ayman Shahi, and I am Head of Learning and Development at Oman Arab Bank, and I will be the webinar moderator today. Over the next month or so, we will be running a series of online workshops that are focused on innovation, personal development, and career success. For more information about the workshops and to find out how you can register, please follow us on our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Aju. Dr. Aju is a co-founder of Performance Factory, and today he is going to share the development of key competencies that will be useful of the world of tomorrow. Before I hand the mic over to Dr. Aju, we love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Ask Question tab at the bottom of your player, or raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. We will be answering the question at the end of the presentation. Dr. Aju, over to you.
Thank you, Ayman. Thanks a lot to Oman Arab Bank for giving us this opportunity, and good morning to each one of you. And thank you for making it this morning here. I'd like to, first of all, hope and expect that all of us are doing well, keeping safe and healthy during this extremely important phase in our lives, and hoping that all of you are keeping your families and yourselves safe, as well as wishing all of you a very, very happy Ramadan. The topic that we will be discussing today, and I say the word discuss because I think nobody at this point in time is clearly an authority in determining what are the skill sets for the new way of working, because this is a highly evolving area of work, and there is a lot of changes that we are seeing around us. So I call this a discussion primarily because we will be able to, at the end of this presentation, have a free chat amongst ourselves in terms of what our viewpoints are with the way the workplace is changing, and therefore what are the skill sets that we think are going to be relevant during that period in time. This presentation is a very small presentation, very quick in that sense. Therefore, at any point in time, if anybody has a question, please feel free to raise your arm or post a question in the Q&A box, and we will address that question as we go. Or towards the end, as we wrap up the session, we will definitely look at taking some of your questions and then opening this up for discussion at that point in time. Great. So to start off with, I want to take you back 13 years. Most of you would have been around at the time of 2007. And I want you to imagine the summer of 2007, just like it's summer now. Usually in Oman, or in about many parts of the world, when it's a summer, it's the time for people to kind of take a little break from the harsh sun that is pounding the earth. And typically that's the time when people are looking for an opportunity to go out on vacation. So if this was a summer of 2007, and as the sun was shining bright, one of the things that we would be looking at is planning on a vacation. And if you were planning a vacation in the year 2007, you would carefully plan to ensure that you with you to make the vacation memorable and hassle-free. Most of us would obviously look out to carry some portable music. So in 2007, the iPods were around. So obviously you would have ensured that your iPods were charged, filled with music, and ready for the journey. We would obviously need a phone to communicate with our friends and family, and also in cases of emergency. So phone is the second gadget that we would carry. We would obviously need a video camera or a camera to take pictures and videos. By 2007, both these features were available in one gadget. So obviously, to create memorable memories, it was important for us to carry some digital tools like that. We would need credit cards because we would be staying in hotels or we would be eating out at restaurants. So we would need to kind of swipe a credit card for payments to be happening. We would need a GPS because we would be navigating through unknown areas and unknown territories. And therefore a GPS is very important. And a GPS is even more important, especially when we would need to rent a car for our vacation. So typically, we would need to be planned across multiple areas to ensure that the vacation is successful and that we and the family have a very beautiful time. And that's how most of our vacation planning has always been. I'd like to fast forward 13 years hence. Now imagine the summer of 2020. The sun is still hitting us bright and sunny. Unfortunately, this year, because of the crazy situation around us, we might not be going on a vacation, but imagine that everything was all right. And we still had the opportunity to head out on that beautiful vacation. From 2007 to 2020, most of our needs have not changed. We would still need music on our vacation. We would still need a phone to talk to others and be in communication. We would definitely need a camera or a video camera to take pictures or videos of our trip. We would still need credit cards to ensure our payments are done. We would still require a GPS to navigate some of the unknown areas where we are traveling. And most importantly, we would still require to rent a car. But instead of having 6 different items with us, today, all of that has now come into one gadget called the phone. The phone allows us to make payments. The phone allows us to make calls. The phone allows us to click pictures or take videos. The phone allows us to listen to music. The phone allows us to... The phone also has a GPS and many, many more features. So companies that were making multiple gadgets suddenly face the threat of having wrapped up all of their products into one device or into one gadget, which makes it an extremely, extremely challenging if you were running the businesses in those other product areas. So what just happened then? What exactly is the area of concern? None of the industries that make these products or services have disappeared. They all exist. We still have camera manufacturing organizations. We still have GPS organizations. We still have credit cards and therefore banks. We still have rent-a-cars or Ubers. We still have music companies and musicians making music that we like. So none of these products or services have disappeared. The way they're presented has definitely changed. All these industries had to change and adapt. And this change and adapt has to be to a new reality. And that new reality required most of the people who work in those organizations to change as well. Because most of us may have been working in these organizations in 2007. And we continue to work in these organizations in 2020. But the way our businesses, the way our products, or the way our services have changed are significant. And I think that sets the tone for the fact that the skill sets that we had in 2007 definitely are not the skill sets that we require in 2020. So if we are still in the workforce, and if we are still in the same industry, producing the same product or providing the same service, what kind of skill sets would we require is going to be the base of our conversation today. Now, a lot of us would say, hey, listen, most of that is because of technology and computing power, right? And that's got very little to do with us. Partly the answer is yes. Most of these high level of innovation that we have seen in the recent past can be attributed to technology and computing power. But there are other forces at work as well. And we will discuss a bit of those other forces immediately after this. So very important to understand that if we have been in the same industry, producing the same product or providing the same service across the 13 years from 2007 to 2020, while the products and services haven't disappeared and they remain in the market, our industries have had to change, and therefore our skill sets, our competencies, our way of working has had to change as well. And as employees or as professionals, we've had to adapt to the new reality. And part of that new reality is a change in technology and computing power that we need to kind of look at. Now, what else has happened around us apart from technology and computing power? One of the most important things that we need to understand is the globalized world and economy that we live in. I think it is very, very important to understand that we live in an intertwined global predisposition. We depend on other countries on a lot of products and services, or parts of the products and services, and other countries depend on us for a lot of their products and services. So we live in a very intertwined globalized world and economy. And I think today, with the ongoing situation of the COVID-19 infection, we are really seeing how a globalized world has been impacted, because the situation is such that everybody across the corners of the world are impacted by the same infection. So the globalized world and economy has made things a lot, has changed industries a lot, has changed the way we work a lot. The second most important thing is that we have a smart, engaged customer. Now, I like to kind of recall the customer of 2007. The customer of 2007 was also a very smart customer, but had very limited information or had limited access to information. So while the customer possibly knew what he wanted, his choices or his awareness of a lot of things were limited. Come 2020, that has significantly changed. He knows exactly what he needs. He or she knows exactly the price that they need to pay for it. He or she knows how to compare your product or your service with another product, another service. He or she is constantly engaged with various forms of media for reviews and for feedback. And he or she has the ability, and that is more significant here, he or she has the ability to make an impact on how well your product or service will sell. In the age of reviews and feedback, if a customer chooses to give us a positive feedback on social media or any other media, it can catapult our business to a higher level. Similarly, if the customer chooses to criticize our product or service, then that can be disastrous for the industry as well, or for our business as well. So it's very important to understand the smartness of a customer may have always been there in 2007, but the more engaged customer is what we are seeing in the recent years. And therefore, the combination of a smart, engaged customer has definitely put its pressures on each and every industry, and therefore each and every product and service. The next most important thing is identity, voice, and community. Now, let me take some time to kind of go through this. I think it's very important to understand that even as recent as 2007, not ideal customers for our products or our services. In the 13 years that has just passed through, we are seeing a new set of customers join in. More younger, more educated, more aware, more traveled, and more people with more choices. And therefore, you're seeing new identity of individuals, and therefore you're seeing new voices coming up. People who demand a certain kind of product or a certain kind of service. And what that has also done is that it has created new communities. Now, I'd like to spend a little time on the community aspect. You see, traditionally, organizations were always viewing customers in a very straitjacketed format. So for example, if you looked at some of the banking products, we would have a loan product where and each of those loan products are underwritten in a particular manner with certain conditions and checklists. And each and every customer had to fit in or fit out of that loan product, which meant majority of customers, for various reasons, were never eligible for those products or services because they never met some of the criteria that the underwriting of that loan required. Today, we have broken that customer into minute communities. So you can have community for women who are running cottage industries. You can have communities for people above the age of 60. You can have a separate community for students studying engineering. You can have a community for students pursuing education abroad. So you're breaking down that overarching customer into minor groups and minor communities. And therefore, these individual communities are now demanding products as services that are very specific to their needs rather than a straitjacketed product or service. And therefore, the industry needs to therefore address those community needs and therefore be able to listen to that voice and that identity and therefore be able to provide products and services. Therefore, what we are seeing today across industries is a plethora of products and services tuned for different sections of society, for different kinds of people. You look at almost all the electronic products and you would see a range of electronic products within the same kind of product to just suit the different kind of people who would require it. So you can have the most complicated smartphone to the very basic smartphone. And because there are different people who would require different levels of that smartphone technology. And therefore there is no particular reason why a person who requires a very simple technology would go ahead and buy the most complicated and pay the price for that complicated device. So it's very important, along with technology and along with computing power, three significant changes that we have seen around us is the globalized world and economy, a smarter engaged customer, and of course, new identity, voice, and community as well. I seem to have a new chat here. Mr. Venu is asking, wants to have a question which he will ask at the end. Sure, Mr. Venu, at any point in time, if you feel that you would like to ask a question now, you can. Similarly, if you want to leave that question for at the end, I'm happy to take that question at the end. There is absolutely no problem in addressing the question in between as well. Right, so we've established the fact that we have had technology and computing power impacting the change in industry. We've had a globalized world and economy impacting the changed workplace. We've had a smarter engaged customer impacting the new workplace. And we've had new communities, new identities, and new voices impacting the workplace. And this is possibly articulated quite significantly well in the World Economic Forum's definition of how the fourth industrial revolution is evolving. And I'd just like to take you through a pictographic representation of that. Now, typically, we've seen four waves of the Industrial Revolution. The first Industrial Revolution, way back in the 1700s, was largely with the use of basic, steam and water and mechanical production equipment. So any fossil fuel that was available around us was harnessed to basically ensure that products were made, and largely mechanical production equipment were used. And we used natural resources such as steam and water to kind of drive those machines. And that's the first generation of industrial revolution that took place way back in the 1700s. 100 years later, as we moved into the 1800s, we saw the establishment of factories, right? So we had more access to electricity. So that became the power generating factor now. We were able to, because of electricity, we were able to now make mass produce equipments. So while the first generation possibly saw the advent of transportation means such as railways, by the second generation of revolution, we were able to see the mass production of transportation vehicles like cars and buses, and we had more access to power. And therefore, employees went or laborers went to a factory, and they were working in the value chain of a factory. There were division of labor. Each of the employees were given a certain task or a certain area to be working in, and therefore they were required to do a certain amount of work and head home. And that's the second industrial revolution. Fast forward to another 100 years, and the third industrial revolution, we've had a lot more of impact of IT, electronics, and from mass production, we now started moving into automated production. Production got a lot more smarter. We may have not necessarily started micro customized production, but we were still able to customize production to a large extent. So we saw product ranges within a certain product, and therefore we were able to kind of take production to the next level of digitized, automated world as the 1900s came in. And very quickly, as the year 2000 came in, we started moving towards what is known as the fourth industrial revolution, or where we are seeing the collaboration between cyber physical systems, which means the machines continue to run, but they are run primarily with a lot of digital interventions. And therefore you're seeing the enhancement of cyber or the collaboration of cyber physical systems. And therefore we have to look at the computer, which earlier used to be a gadget that we would have in our workplace, to now becoming a colleague of ours who would do certain aspects of our work task, and then we would come in to complete that work task. And interesting here is to notice that while each generation of the Industrial Revolution roughly took about a century to kind of make that significant change, the transition between the third Industrial Revolution and the fourth Industrial Revolution did not take that long. In fact, it took very little time. And even within the fourth Industrial Revolution, as we speak, things are changing at a faster pace. And one of the things that we are definitely going to witness is this entire change in industries and in organizations post the COVID-19 infection. And so you're going to see a lot more changes and potentially, a 4.1 industrial revolution within the next year to 2 years, because the way we interact, the way we work, the way products are going to be produced, and the way services are going to be rendered are significantly going to change, especially if the elements of social distancing, if the elements of a digitized world is going to continue in a post-COVID world. So you're going to see massive changes. So inherently, we might be even able to see a fifth industrial revolution potentially within the next 20, 25 years at a much faster pace than the previous industrial revolutions. So typically, this is how the world's organizations have evolved, the world's workplaces have evolved, and this is where we are participants as employees within these organizations or within these industries. And I think it's very important to understand, especially the interplay between digital and physical systems in the fourth industrial revolution. And I would like to underline the fact that digital is going to be a significant part of every industry in the way it transacts or it executes its activities. We are seeing this in healthcare. We are seeing this, we've already seen this significantly in banking and the financial industry. We've seen this significantly in the travel industry. We've seen this in manufacturing at a large extent. But manufacturing is probably at the cusp of a massive digital revolution as well. And we've also seen this in small areas like education, for example. It's a classical case. Some things that we were absolutely unimaginable at one point in time, and here we are on the 12th of May, where all of our children are potentially sitting at home and are in touch with their teachers through online learning mechanisms, and interacting with their classmates and with their teachers and learning through those systems. In part, these systems were already available And so it was easy for us to migrate towards these systems. There's a lot more of things that we will see in these systems because of the kind of challenges the present systems have. And therefore, we'll see a massive revolution in the next few years, especially in educational technology, financial technology, and healthcare technology, which seems to be at the cusp of a massive revolution. Now, don't forget, it's also very important to understand, if you look at the three generations of industrial revolution, the first generation, the second generation, and the third generation. The first generation was largely state run, or it was largely government run, right? And the second and third generation saw the evolution of the private sector. And therefore we saw private individual money coming onto the table. When it came to the fourth generation, of course, obviously the private sector continues to thrive and continues to add value. But if you've noticed, around the world, one sector that has probably taken on digitization at a much faster pace continues to be government services. And this is a global trend. Across the world, government services have moved to digital platforms much faster than potentially some of the private industries as well. And that's simply because moving on to a digital platform or e-enabled services has allowed the government sector to keep a control on costs, provide services to far-flung places and to people who would have earlier found it very difficult to access those services. And also because they've been able to therefore generate vast amount of data with which they can therefore plan their budgets and their social programs much more effectively. So when it came to the fourth industrial revolution in terms of digitization and the mix between cyber and physical systems, we've seen a better adaptation from the government sector or from the public sector, while the private sector is also constantly scaling up to match the fourth industrial revolution. So it's very interesting to see how the government sector has come back to kind of garner the advantages of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, so if we're around us, how is the workplace changing, right? And how is all of our offices, all of our factories, all of our industries, how are they changing to adapt to this change, right? Let's look at what's happening in the workplace before deciding how we should be adapting or what skill sets we should add. The first thing that we are seeing is we're seeing change in work patterns, right? Most of us have grown up or seen our parents going to work during fixed hours, a typical 9 to 5 kind of a working hour or whatever shift pattern of working hour, but fixed hours. From there, we are moving to what is known as a 24/7 working environment. So it's a working environment that's 24/7, that is more active and that is more that's available at any point in time. The next thing that we are seeing is management revolution. Organizations were earlier viewing employees as breadwinners, people who came to a workplace primarily because they needed to earn a certain living and therefore look after their families. From becoming breadwinners, employees today are becoming value creators. These are employees who are now creating the next product or the next generation of service within an organization. So instead of looking at employees as people who just came in to earn a living, now the organization is looking at a culture of intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs who are internally created within the organization. The next biggest change that we are seeing is flexible working. And I think we've already seen the value of that during this particular time. The traditional working from office to moving to working from anywhere. And when I say anywhere, it does not just mean working from home. It brings in the concept of remote working, working from any location, working from co-working spaces, working from another location. And that has brought in a lot of flexibility at work and therefore availability of resources as and when needed. So that's the next bit that we are seeing within the workplace. We're also seeing a smarter workplace. And what does that mean? Traditionally, if you notice, we went to the tools. As employees, we were expected to get up every morning, dress ourselves, and go towards where the work took place or where the tool was. Now the tool comes to us, or the tool is with us. And therefore, we're seeing a smarter workplace, from going to the tools to having the tools with us. So that's the next change that we're looking at the workplace. The next biggest change that we are seeing is, and this is significant because traditionally, if you look at the various generations of the Industrial Revolution, especially the factory-based Industrial Revolution, we've always seen a very hierarchical, control-based management, which means you reported to your boss, and your boss was always responsible for your, for your performance. And therefore, in that sense, there was a lot of management controls. To now, we're seeing an entire self-managed employees or self-managed workforce. People who are expected to manage themselves rather than be managed by others. And that links back to the other points, because it's only if you are self-managed that you can actually use the tools effectively, and that you will therefore be able to work from anywhere and therefore be a value creator. Because otherwise, your ability to add value or to be an entrepreneur would be extremely limited. So that's the next big change that we are seeing within the workplace. We're also seeing culture changing. And I think that's linked to the point that we spoke about earlier. From taking instructions to taking on responsibilities. Employees of today are required to take on responsibility for the task that is required. And therefore, they're expected that they will that they will definitely have that perspective of being responsible for the work that they are required to do. We're also seeing the significant change in empowered teams, right? And I'd like to take a little time to kind of discuss this point. Traditional organizations, especially in the 1900s, and in the hierarchical form of management control, knowledge was always locked in certain pockets, and certain people were the knowledge workers. And the rest of the employees were largely taking on instructions and just executing tasks that were given to them. What we are seeing now in the new generation with the changes in the cyber-physical systems is that we are seeing that knowledge is distributed across the width and breadth of the organization. And we are also seeing reverse knowledge distribution. What does that mean? We would possibly be working in organizations where today a young 22-year-old employee might be the one telling us what the next product or the next service should be and how we should go about marketing it or distributing it. And so therefore, instead of the traditional understanding of learning from the older generation towards the new generation, we are seeing a reverse knowledge distribution, potentially from the younger generation to the older generation as well. And therefore, we are seeing a lot more empowered teams and teams being allowed to make decisions at the team level rather than the hierarchical management control-based perspective. And finally, I think it's very important to understand that everything that we do in some form or the other has to be linked to a reward. And so previously, rewards were always for presence, attendance, and for being available. From there, we are moving towards rewards for achievement, getting the job done, getting the task executed, ensuring that the next product is launched, ensuring that the next innovative service is provided. Those are now are called achievements, and rewards are now based on those goals being met rather than rewards for just coming to the office and occupying a certain space. So very quickly, in most of our workspaces, now when I say most of the workspaces, obviously there'll be differences between the manufacturing sector and the service sector. But nevertheless, if you were to look at an overall perspective across various sectors, to summarize, what we are seeing is a change in work patterns from fixed hours to a 24-hour, 24/7 kind of working environment. A management revolution where employees are now being viewed as value creators instead of breadwinners. Flexible working where people are working from anywhere versus working from a physical office. A smarter workplace from where we were expected to go to the tools to having the tools with us and therefore being able to execute the tasks anywhere. From management controls to being self-managed. From taking instructions to taking responsibilities. From having knowledge in certain pockets to a wider distributed knowledge environment. And of course, from being rewarded for presence or for physical appearance to rewards for achievement of a goal or a task. I think that's very important. At this point in time, I have a question through the chat, and I'd just like to take that question. Since you started with 2007, it brings the memory of Gonu, the flood-related calamity. No one was prepared. From 2007 to 2020, how do you feel the government and organizations have learned lessons related to calamities? What more can be done? Online shopping is now getting popular. Can banks go paperless and fully digital? I mean, even for loans. Thank you for this question, Mr. Venu. I think it's a fantastic question. And, you know, when I do a lot of my consulting work, I usually start my story with the Gonu story. And one of the reasons why 2007 is particularly of interest to me, and I've used 2007 within this presentation as well, is because it is the year 2007 when the Performance Factory came into Oman to start our business here. And we literally came 2 days before Gonu. And so Gonu has special memories in our minds. And you're right. So, you know, if you were to just look at from a very Oman based perspective, and I know there could be potentially some participants in this forum who are from outside of Oman, but since a large majority of people would be from Oman, I'd like to give this Oman-based perspective. You know, if you just look at the last 10 to 13 years, there have been significant changes. So for example, Gonu was one significant event that happened, and you're absolutely right about that. And that actually brought about the concept of business continuity planning and disaster management. I think most organizations were not prepared, and you know that the entire BCP disaster recovery kind of concepts came into being immediately after that. Very soon in 2008, 2009, we had the global recession. Many countries around us were impacted. Oman was not significantly impacted, but nevertheless, we did see you know, an indirect effect of that. And we saw a lot more controls coming in terms of, especially from a lending perspective and things like that. Then came the 2011 Arab Spring. Again, not something that impacted us directly as much, but we did see indirect impact. We saw the true rising of social media during that time. And we saw the impact that, you know, that brought about because, you know, strategically organizations had to change their strategies around that. We then saw the oil price rise and the oil price fall of the 2013-14 times. So there was a time when oil was as good as $130, $140 to a barrel, to it coming down to extremely low prices. Again, organizations had to change and adapt to that reality in Oman. And then now, you know, very, very significantly, we're seeing the COVID-19 infection, which is again, obviously is going to change a lot of things, right? It's possibly, for starters, it has brought about work from home and smart working. But I think we're going to see a lot more changes in terms of supply chain disruptions, in terms of outsourcing. We're going to see a lot more impact as far as digitization and automation is concerned. So yes, I think governments and organizations have learned lessons from the past. They have adapted as well to a large extent. The fact is, you know, as much as a lot of people were wary about online shopping in a country like Oman, because you know, we don't have the economies of scale for that. But nevertheless, I think you know, what we have seen is because those portals were available today in the event of the COVID-19 situation, they are there to kind of help us. To your question about banks going paperless, absolutely. I think if it hasn't, I think it's about time it does. especially while we've seen a lot of retail banking going digital, I think paper still continues to remain in the top banking side. And we will potentially see even corporate banking going paperless, loans going paperless. So we should be able to, kind of upload our documents and the banks get access to that. Of course, anything that we put out there in the digital world also needs the highest level of security. So we assume that those security measures will be in place, and therefore, we will be able to adapt. To a large extent, I think, if I were to answer your question, Mr. Venu, as human beings and as societies, we've largely been adaptive to a calamity. And so in that sense, we are good reactors to a situation. I think the next generation is going to be calling for a little bit of proactive. We might have to start thinking of scenario-based planning. And sometimes those scenarios may have to think about worst case scenarios. For example, no one could have imagined that the entire world would come to a pause for 3 or 4 months because of COVID-19. And I'm saying 3 or 4 months very carefully because we still don't know when this will be out. So I think from a reactive behavior, we might have to go to a very proactive behavior, and industries might see that next change as far as the 5th industrial revolution is happening. And I think that is where artificial intelligence will definitely play a very active part. Sukena asked me a question about empowering team. How can we measure the risk of empowering team during the crisis? Sukena, fantastic question, and thank you for this. I think, you see, every aspect of what you see on this slide right now is a risk, right? So changing in work patterns, management, just ensuring that, control moves from management to being self-managed. A smarter workplace where people are expected to, work with the tools, people taking responsibilities versus instructions. All of them have their own certain level of risk. So, when you look at those risks, the risks are definitely there. I think organizations, first of all, when you look at empowered teams, I think the most important thing will be trust. So how well do we trust our team members to be able to take the right decisions and to be able to manage the crisis? And the second most important thing is crisis generally tends to bring out the best out of human beings. I'm not saying therefore we should always have a crisis, but usually it does tend to do that. Therefore, from that perspective, I think the risk is, while the risk definitely continues to be there, you are able to identify amongst your team members who is rising to the occasion and who is not capable of rising to the occasion. Which means when this crisis is over and when you align your business back to what the previous normal was, I think you should be smarter in looking at what are the, who is capable of managing that risk a lot better than the others. Also, I think the very important thing about empowering teams is the management style. Do we have the ability or have we reached the management maturity of delegating and of giving people the ability to be empowered? Or are we still using the management style of control and report? And if we still have that style, then I don't think we could keep claiming empowered team, but that would not necessarily achieve what the team really requires for empowerment. George Eckenberg, I think you've asked me a question about, will you come to the key competencies required? Yes, I am. That's my next slide. And therefore, I just wanted to address these questions while we were at it. I'm just coming back to that point. I hope I've answered some of your queries. So this is how the workplace is changing. So if the workplace is changing in this manner, what are the skill sets that we are required to have for the changing workplace? Now, while I was, doing my own research on this area, and when I was, trying to kind of look at a host of information that I have, I very forcefully kept myself away from core digital skills, right? When I mean core digital skills, I mean, things like blockchain or artificial intelligence, and machine learning, because some of those skills may be relevant to a certain profession. I've kept this, this list more from a soft skill perspective, from a overall employee perspective rather than a technical skill perspective. So, you might definitely need certain technical hard skills as well for the workplace of tomorrow. But our conversation will be limited to more the softer skills, and therefore the skill sets that are required across a width of employees rather than certain specific employees. Number one, obviously, is to be a flexible worker. I think the most important skill sets that we have to have is to be open to be able to work from anywhere, anytime, right? The old excuse of, I don't have access to something, or I'm not able to come to work today, I don't think that is going to cut anymore because, access is not an issue anymore. And your requirement in a physical location is not necessarily required in many jobs. And therefore, the ability to be a flexible worker, to be able to work from anywhere, anytime, is I think, the first most important skill set that would be required for the changing workplace. The second most important thing is to be a critical thinker. Always look out for solutions that enhance the customer value. Now, I like to take a minute or two here. Critical thinker is a person who has the ability to constantly look at his area of work or his business or his industry and question the way that industry works. Even if the industry is doing fantastically well, even if your organization is performing very well, constantly looking at the way it does its work and question about how can we bring about the next change? How can we make this faster? How can we make this simple? Now, when we do that, I think it's very important that we do that from the perspective of the customer. And why do I say that? I say that with a lot of caution because a lot of times we are forced to look for solutions that improves our way of working. And that can make our team members' ways of working much faster or much easier. And that's not a bad thing. But if making it faster or easier for us means making it tougher and inconvenient to the customer, then it is of no value. So it's very important for us to be a critical thinker, look out for solutions, but keep the customer in the center of that solution and look at how much of value you're adding to the customer's perception of your product or your service, and then look at how you can enhance your team's or your own personal value as well. So I'd just like to ensure that that critical thinking comes from that perspective. It's a given now, and I think the next point is a natural point about being tech savvy. Now, a lot of people ask, oh, does that mean that I have to learn some computer programs, because I'm a finance professional or I'm a procurement professional or I'm a corporate communications professional? Should I now just go and, start picking up all these technical skills and become a techie? I don't think being tech savvy is that, right? If you have the ability, if you have the competency to pick up certain technical skills, which are relevant into your area. For example, if a corporate communications professional can pick up digital marketing or digital skills, it will obviously be extremely, extremely valuable. But having said that, tech savvy is not about picking up on all the technology skills or the digital skills, but it's having a knowledge of how they work and ensuring that you understand the relationship they bring together. We can't be working in an industry or in an organization and not understand how the technology that drives that industry or that drives that business works. So therefore, knowledge of technology and digital means is no more a choice. A certain level of tech savviness is required across jobs, across profiles, and across designations. And I don't think we can afford to have any employee in our teams who claim to be tech deficient or digital deficient in that sense. So therefore, knowledge of technology and digital means I don't think is a choice anymore. The next most important thing is to be data literate. Data is the new fuel. And it enhances the value of an organization. So it's very important to understand data. Now, when I say the data, again, I don't mean trying to understand data mining techniques or, get into data analytics, but the relationship between the data that you see and the industry you work in or the business you are in, and how that data is therefore allowing you to make the next strategic choice. I think it's very important for us to understand that. Now, let me just give an example. I think, for example, if I'm a procurement specialist, right? And what does data mean to me? If I realize that, I'm seeing a certain level of vendors being able to provide certain products at a certain price and consistently provide that at certain price because they are procuring locally, versus when they're procuring that same product or that item from an international market, there is a significant jump in the pricing, right? And therefore, but there is also a quality difference between a certain local product versus an international product. So what is that relationship between pricing and quality? And therefore, how much can I move from an international procurement to a local procurement and add value to the local industry, right? The relationship between such data points, the relationship between, for example, in banking, when a 30-year-old individual comes to take a housing loan, and mostly housing loan usually spans about 15 to 20 years. A quick conversation about trying to find out about that individual's family will potentially make us realize that he's got a young family with young kids. And if he's going to be paying his housing loan for the next 20 years, somewhere in that duration, potentially his children are going to be of the age of 18, where they might want to get into university. And at that point in time, with the existing loan liability that he has, he might find it extremely difficult to fund the further education of his children. And therefore, from a bank's perspective, what product would actually fit him when he is during that time, that would kind of ensure that he's able to kind of protect both his house as well as the future of his children. So a lot of relationship. Now, this is not technical skill. This is just a simple analytical data literacy skill, the ability to understand the relationship between two sets of data, and therefore how can that be of value to you or to your organization. I think the next most important skill is being adaptable, right? The ability to fail fast, learn new skills, and constantly innovate. Now, I keep talking about, in my multiple consulting assignments, the willingness to fail fast is extremely, extremely important. But failing fast does not mean not putting everything into it. It means putting everything into it, looking at the results. And if the results are not in line with your expectations, then taking the next course very quickly is very important as an adaptable skill. And the simple reason for that is because if you constantly continue to work in an area which you know is doomed to fail, then you're wasting a lot of resources, monetary-wise, people-wise, skill-wise, time-wise as well. And therefore, by then, somebody else would have already, kind of taken the bus. You look at most of the products that we see today in the world. For example, Orkut and MySpace were the first social networking tools that were there much before Facebook. But yet Facebook came and kind of overshot them because they were just not up to the mark in terms of their service. And though Orkut was run by none other than somebody like Google. Similarly, Yahoo was a search engine much before Google was a search engine, or before we knew the word Google. But Google came in and did far better in the field of search engine. Yahoo, who was once supposed to actually was given the choice to buy Google, now Yahoo does not even exist, and Google is the big giant it is. So the ability to understand, make quick decisions, fail fast, move on to the next is very important. To a lot of organizations that we admire, it's very important to understand most of them, we know them for certain products, but we should also understand there are many products that they may have killed, which we do not know of. And that's because they know the results were not up to their expectations, so they moved on. The next most important thing is creative. Now, when it comes to creativity, I just wanted to, we're not talking about being artistic. It will definitely be great if you're artistic or if you're creative from that perspective. But I'm talking about making creative strategic decisions, creative strategic choices. And what do I mean by that? You see, all of this technology, all of this digitization, the artificial intelligence and other tools that are there, they're going to work along with us. And they're going to constantly slice and dice data and throw important data points in front of us. But eventually, as human beings, we will be the ones who are making the decision. Now, those creative decisions will require a creative bent of mind. Things that others may have not done. One of the most important things one of the most frustrating things that we see when we work with multiple clients in the consulting space is that whenever we are proposing a solution, usually we hear a question which says, oh, so which other organization has done something similar? Which typically looks at, organizations are looking at, if somebody else has done it, then it'd probably be safe to do it. Which means organizations are not very open about being the first ones to take on a new idea or a new concept. That is where creativity comes in. You will have multiple data points. How are you going to use those multiple data points to be the first one to take that leap is very important. And that is why creativity will be very important. I think it's very important, the next piece, I think we've heard a lot about it. I don't want to dwell much into it. The point about being emotionally intelligent. And what does that mean? I think we need to understand that we need to be emotionally in control, especially when things are going crazy. And I link this back to the point about being adaptable. If you have to fail fast, and if you have to learn new skills, we can't lose ourselves, and we can't be blaming others, or we can't be trying to find excuses on a constant basis. The other thing about emotionally intelligent is also very, I'd like to also underline another point is, in each of our workplaces, wherever we're working today, we are working with people across multiple generations. So there tends to be a habit of, either they're too young or they're too old, and lack of adaptability between multiple generations. It's very important here to bring in our emotional intelligence skills, to understand each other or each other's groups of people, and therefore bring in that emotional intelligence here. It's very important to be culturally sensitive. And what do we mean by that? We mean the need to accept and work with diverse points of view. I think, again, it links back to the ability to be innovative. If you are blocking other person's point of view, then you are not going to get the right product or the right service into the market. So it's very important to be culturally sensitive. Sometimes even have to sacrifice your idea for the sake of a better idea that might come from somewhere else. And therefore, to be able to accept and work with the diverse point of view. And my final point, obviously, is to be collaborative. No more than now is it very important to have the skill of working well with other people, right? We live in a time and age when anybody who thinks that he can individually achieve something is possibly living in a dream world. It's very important for us to understand that we actually achieve a lot better when different sets of people come to contribute and work well with others, and therefore the ability to collaborate. So just quickly trying to summarize, the ability to be working from anywhere, anytime, and therefore being flexible. The ability to be a creative thinker, looking at solutions, keeping the customer in the center of mind. The ability to be tech savvy, which means ability to have, understand technology at its basic structure. The ability to understand the relationship between multiple data points. The ability to be adaptable, failing fast, learning new skills, and innovate. The ability to be creative, which is to make creative decisions or strategic decisions. The ability to be emotionally intelligent, to be able to keep our emotions in control. The ability to accept and work with diverse points of view. And finally, working well with others. Now, we have listed out these key skill sets. How do we know whether we have them? It's very important as employees of the next generation for us to be open to be assessed. And therefore, as a final takeaway, I would say it's very important for us to find how can we assess ourselves against these. And there are multiple assessment companies and multiple assessment tools out there which will easily assess our skill sets against each of these characteristics or competencies. And it's very important for us to understand and be open to the feedback that those assessments give. Mind you, none of these skill sets are trainable within a college education. So your college education or your qualification that you get from a university is not going to potentially teach you some of these skills. Most of these skill sets are learned on the go. And it's very important, therefore, to be open to feedback, open to assessments, and understand where you can practice these skill sets and who you need to be using as a mentor to kind of get good feedback on your own ability to against these skills. And that would be the way in which you would be able to adapt to the next generation of working. At this point in time, I'll just take a couple of questions. I think there are some chat questions first. We need to consider cost, quality, and time while procuring locally or internationally. Absolutely, Mashal, I agree with you. Cost, quality, and time is very important. In fact, it's called the triangle of tension between cost, quality, and service, right? Because whenever you want better quality and service, cost tends to go up. And whenever you're trying to cut costs, there's obviously an impact on quality and time. You're absolutely right. The relationship between that is very important. Nevertheless, sometimes you might be able to see a very clear relationship between some of these points through data analysis. And that should allow you to very clearly find out whether it is better to procure locally or internationally. And vice versa. Sometimes with the data, you would be able to approach a vendor, in this case, potentially a local vendor, and explain to him why his product, while of a certain good quality, but is of a higher cost, is not being considered. And therefore, it might help the local vendor to change certain processes within his production line to be able to meet your standards. So it's a two-way journey of how data can be used. It's one way for you to make decisions. It's another way for you to work with suppliers, work with vendors, helping them to streamline their own processes or their own work areas, and therefore provide a quality product to your industry. So it's a two-way journey in terms of how data can be used. For example, today, if you look at it, restaurants are now on the delivery apps. So you have the delivery apps who or through whom we book for a meal, and they go they go to the restaurant, collect the meal, and then deliver it to you. But there's a lot of data being generated through the data apps. So the delivery apps have the ability, after some time, to tell the restaurant that in a certain time of the day or during certain periods of time during a month, these are the kind of products that are constantly seeing fast movement. And therefore, you should be concentrating on a certain kind of dish or a certain kind of a meal that tends to be more popular with people, rather than trying to keep an inventory filled with multiple kind of menus. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that both the supplier and the producer and the creator can have between in data sharing. One more question from Mr. Venu. What about disruption in automotive industry, customer buying car online, showrooms disappearing? Well, absolutely. Tesla has already done that in multiple markets, where they decided to kind of take away the dealership concept and go straight to the customer. It's a concept that is potentially coming, and we are already seeing the buying car online as a concept, especially in the second-hand market. So that is a potential disruption without a doubt, because it's much more easier to deal directly with them. I think the only potential where the showroom still is of extreme importance is because the showroom is not today just a sale point. It's also a service point. So there is a pre and a post that is associated with a showroom. And so as long as the service element continues to remain with that provider, there would be enough reason for people to visit that provider for sales as well. Apart from that, also, until we come out with a situation where we have extremely good digital simulations, and I think we might see that very soon. The other thing that showroom provides is the ability to test multiple vehicles before making a final decision. Once we get to better digital simulation, we might be able to make that decision digitally rather than physically visiting the showroom. So yes, it is a concept that might that you will see a lot of change in. How soon is yet to be seen, but definitely you will see a lot more changes there. Yes, thank you, Professor Kabali. Yes, you will see the impact of augmented and virtual reality completely changing the way we interact with, especially in the automotive industry. And it's already happening. It's happening in a lot of places. It's an industry. It's still a touch and feel kind of industry. And because it's still a touch and feel kind of industry, and people have the ability to move from one, showroom to another showroom to kind of test multiple vehicles, the showrooms continue to be there. And like I said, again, the service factor also continues to be there. It will definitely get better over a period of time. And that would definitely have an impact in how showrooms are being seen. I have some questions on the question answers as well. Hassan is asking the question, do you think there is a rewiring needed in the concept of organization social responsibility and individual social responsibility in such disruptive phenomena? Also, do you feel that both these concepts need to be interlinked appropriately? I think it's a fantastic question, Hassan, and thank you for asking that. You see, social responsibility now is not X percentage in the budget that is booked and organizations looking for, certain avenues to spend that money and trying to find certain underprivileged sections of society. Today, the modern organization's social responsibility typically starts from the time he's producing a product or providing a service. And therefore, when you look at the entire digitized world, I think one of the challenges most industries have is, how can my product or my service reach the last man on planet Earth, right? And that last man on planet Earth may not necessarily be a person who is necessarily capable of affording everything that I have, but may still want those services. So for example, banks are looking at, reaching the remote corners of a country and to be able to provide services to people in the extreme remote places, and not necessarily through branches, but through technology. We're seeing that happening in education and in healthcare as well. Technology in education is allowing a lot of young children who, for various reasons, were not able to access education or were not able to go to a school, now being able to get educated through technology means and possibly get access to very good instructors. And so it's kind of completely flipped, because traditionally we chose the good schools for our children based on the quality of the teaching staff. But today, some of the underprivileged children could have access to some of the best instructors in the world because of technology. And healthcare similarly, I think and we've seen that fantastically well, even during the COVID-19 situation, the ability to be able to contact trace, the ability to identify who you've come in touch with, all of that we're seeing a lot of interplay with technology. So social responsibility, an organization has a social responsibility, not just from a budgetary perspective, I think from an everyday perspective. And individuals within the organization, therefore, are playing their part as well when it comes to the individual social responsibility. And you will see that on a regular basis, we are seeing constant organizations who are able to make savings in certain areas, not just keeping that as savings, but passing it on back to their customers. So you will see a lot of that social responsibility as well. Thank you. I hope I have answered all the questions. Artika, thank you. Thanks a lot for your comment as well. I hand it back to the Learning Hub.
Thank you, Dr. Aju, for the insightful presentation. We hope all enjoyed today's session. Our next session will be held tomorrow at 11 a.m. Once again, please visit Oman Arab Bank social media pages for more information. So if anyone has a question, it's open now. As we will close. Thank you, Dr. Aju.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.